He slept, he stole, he was rude to the customers. Still, there goes the best damned employee a convenience store ever had.
You know, this reminds me of Troika. Their games were a clusterfuck of glitches and bugs. Some of them were even unplayable in some systems unless you installed a fan-made mod pack. Their loading screens took longer than it takes your average TikTok user to figure out how to use a map. The political leanings of their personnel dripped, or rather flooded over their creations. Yet, they were the best video game developers that have ever roamed the earth. Just like this girl is the smartest, funniest, prettiest girl who's ever lived. And if you still don't get the moral of the story, I'll lay it bare to you. Perfection is in the eye of the beholder. And just like the girl in the picture, Troika was capable of pressing all my keys in just the right way. And for a brief magical moment in video game history, this wonderful developer joined forces with yet another company who knew exactly what to do to make me the happiest guy on earth.
It's a match made in heaven.
The result of this once-in-a-lifetime joint venture was Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura. Arcanum was my first isometric Infinity Engine-based computer RPG, and if you've wondered these many months, man, why isn't Alex as thrilled with Baldur's Gate and Torment as I am? Well, now you have your answer. If Sierra and Troika were so good at meeting and surpassing my expectations, it was, well, because they were the ones who taught me what to expect from video games in the first place. So I usually kick these videos off by saying, welcome to Yold Entertainment, my name is Alex, and as you know, it is my duty, my mission, my purpose in life to help you decide whether that game that you have been thumping for so long is indeed the right game for you or not. But I don't rightly know if this video is going to be useful to help you decide whether you should get Arcanum or not, because this shit's gonna be biased.
I am a fan.
You have been warned, but a duty is a duty and we must still adhere to our system of categories in some capacity, I guess. So Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura is a classic RPG, and its combat can either be real-time strategy or turn-based. And for those, character creation and character progression are first.
This is it. This is the real score.
We've said before that there are many character creation and leveling systems out there. As different as these systems are in Outward, Titan Quest, and Divinity Original Sin 2, they all serve their primary purpose impeccably. They offer players the right tools for them to weave their own tactical approach to the game. In all these games, I always felt like
I did it my way.
And that's great and all, but Arcanum takes character creation to a whole new universe. I like it when a game provides branching paths that are the result of the decisions you make as a player. And I love it when plot-related choices depend on the kind of character you are. And if that gets decided in the character creation and leveling screen, I'm gonna be a very happy man. This adds a healthy dose of opportunity cost, and that makes your decisions matter. Not to mention it also adds a great deal of replay value. The good kind of replay value. For example, if you choose to be stunningly beautiful at the cost of being dumb as fuck, some doors will open effortlessly, but you will struggle trying to exert any real power to change people's mind regarding important things. You will have dumb dialogue options, and NPCs will react accordingly.
Do you have any idea what all of this means? You speak! I mean, of course you speak. What am I, a blathering idiot? Wait, what did you say? Maybe I should be writing all of this down. By the gods! I cannot believe that the living one has been reincarnated in the body of an imbecile. You are here to save us. Why did the gods return your spirit in this defective shell? And isn't that an ogre among the wreckage? It seems very unlikely that an ogre would have the intelligence to fly such a complex device. Yes, whatever you say, O living one. Oh, this is unbelievable. It seems even fate is not without a sense of humor.
That means that there's some pretty hilarious conversations that you're going to miss out on if you roll a smarty pants kind of character, like I always do. Compare what you just saw to this. This is what happens when you roll a smart character.
You speak! I mean, of course you speak. What am I, a blathering idiot? I am at a loss here. I don't quite know what to do. I mean, my name is Virgil, sir, and I'm new to the Panari religion. Your religion, and Oh, wait! Isn't that an ogre among the wreckage? It seems very unlikely that an ogre would have the intelligence to fly such a complex device.
Similarly, if you put all your points into strength and none into intellect, chances are you will always have to resort to beating the crap out of everyone to get what you want. And the same principle applies when you choose your race and sex. If you choose to be a dwarf, you can't be female. There's lore reasons for that, and they are rock solid and very interesting. And being a male or a female has a lot more impact than in most other games. For example, if you create a female character, you will have the option of doing this prostitution quest for Madame Lil early on in the game. Completing this quest will give you 300 coins and some experience, but it will also come at the expense of not being able to start a quest line that is a lot lengthier. On the other hand, again, if you are a girl, you will have to find a way to sneak into a gentleman's club in the city of Torment, because women are not allowed in there. And if you don't want to acquiesce to the desires of its libidinous owner, you'll have to kill him and his ogre guard to get the invitation letter. Or, you can pickpocket the invitation if you have the appropriate pickpocket level. And none of these are things that you'll have to do if you're a guy, for example. Another example, if you're not a medium race, like a halfling, a gnome, or a dwarf, you won't be able to access some locations in the game because they require you to crawl through a small crevice. Then there's also technological disciplines for you to choose, schools of magic, social skills, combat skills, you name it. And investing points into any of these aspects will have an impact on how you navigate the story. Arcanum rewards you with everything from dumb dialogue choices if you have the intelligence score of your average TikTok user, to wildly different outcomes and conversations depending on your charisma and persuasion skills, to branching paths that actually take you to different places and have you meet different people. I think Tyranny isn't the only game that comes close to this level of path branchiness. And there's no denying that it draws very heavy inspiration from Arcanum in its quest design. Arcanum also has background stories. These are hands down the best background stories that I've ever seen in a CRPG. They are beautifully written and add truckloads to the immersion aspect of the game, but they also have a huge impact on your character's possibilities, gameplay, and story-wise. You were institutionalized at a young age and believed to be mentally handicapped. After several years, the Institute lost funding and you were turned onto the streets with nothing more than the clothes on your back. You are brilliant with a keen grasp of numbers and mathematics, but you are barely able to talk. You gain a significant bonus to intelligence and an exceptional bonus to your gambling skill. However, years of being locked away makes you suffer physically and emotionally. You talk as if you had a much lower intelligence, and you suffer penalties to strength, constitution, dexterity, and willpower. Actually, my approach to Arcanum for my last playthrough would have absolutely not been possible if I hadn't chosen this background. Charlatan's Protégé. Okay, this one looks like it's up my alley. Having been convinced by a traveling salesman to become his apprentice, you've given up your life in the military academy you were enrolled in. You gain a major bonus to charisma, but lose some physical strength, constitution, as well as taking slight penalties to all your combat skills. Alright, so let's call you Charlatan. And that is
So good. So good.
It's beautiful.
Amazing.
There's just so many options in-game that come from what you do with this panel, the amount of followers that you can have, the initial reaction others have towards you, dialogue options, available quests, gear, you name it. It also comes packed with all the opportunity cost any RPG worth its salt should have. This is an easy 10 out of 10, and if I could give it a 45, I would. Gameplay. So gameplay in Arcanum is your typical four-legged beast. And let's start with combat because, tell me the bad news first and all that.
Maybe if you tell me the bad news in a good way, it won't sound so bad.
The bad news in a good way. Yes, I can do that. Yes, bad news in a good way. Yeah. Well, here goes.
Okay, it's different. You can command your followers and summons to walk to places and attack enemies, and well, there's tactical value and all that. You can, for example, ask your companions to wait somewhere if you think that the combat that lies ahead is beyond their fighting capabilities, and send your trusty summons instead to take care of business, leaving your companions in the rear guard to take care of healing duties and those stragglers who make it past the real combatants, your summons. There's also the possibility to switch between real-time and turn-based, and if you're not good at lockpicking, you can summon a creature and order it to attack a chest or a door. Similarly, if you're not good at detecting traps, you can send your summons ahead to get all those pesky traps triggered to make the place safer. Also,
Why do I keep up this charade?
it sucks, okay? All that I just said is true, but it is the clunkiest, buggiest, and most unbalanced combat system in any of those RPGs that came out between 1998 and 2004. And there's so fucking much of it. It's the exact same problem that Planescape Torment had, only, well, worse. To be fair, combat is significantly more varied, and there are some tactical considerations to be made, but in the end, the only way in which I was capable of finding my fun in all the many, many dungeons Arcanum has, was to plan my character's development around the magic school of summoning, and learning that summon ogre champion spell as soon as I could. Yes, ogre champions are completely broken, but what the hell. At least the difficulty in Arcanum demands that you pay attention to your gear, and there is very interesting loot in this game. It's not comparable to your average action RPG, but it's pretty good compared to other classic RPGs. There's also the fact that not every piece of gear can be equipped by every character, and that the best loot requires you to kill boss-like enemies and explore the very confines of the darkest dungeons. This all adds weight to looting and exploration, and it makes combat a bit less of a pain. This guy in Ashbury sold absolutely amazing gear for magic users. I couldn't afford all of it, of course, and well, you know me, I'm a goody-doer through and through. I despise evil. So I just took my party of goody-doing men to the bar and asked them to wait for me for a bit, and then I went back to the guy, summoned a couple of ogre champions, and when no one was watching, I butchered the dude and stole all his belongings. But it was all in the name of a good cause. You know, stemming the tide of evil and all that. And yes, this is a thing that you can do in this game, by the way. There's also puzzle solving in Arcanum. There's not too much of it, and most of it seems to happen at the city of Tula. And I'm not crazy about games that have puzzle solving as part of their gameplay repertoire when puzzles are confined to a specific place. I'm just never in the puzzle solving mood when I get to set place. And I blame games for this, for not telling me, hey, this game is also about puzzles. As half-assed as it was, I think Bard's Tales 4 did a fine job letting the player know the slope of the land. It was like, hey dude, this game is going to be 40% combat, 40% puzzles, and 20% wandering about like an idiot. Are you in? The puzzles themselves in Arcanum were a little bit harder than your average puzzle in a CRPG, and I think that because of that, solving them was also more rewarding. And thankfully, none of them were this ugly mofo of a puzzle. Fuck you, decoding puzzle in Underrail. Then there's exploration, and I think Troika totally nailed this aspect of the gameplay in Arcanum. Locations are not only interesting and filled with loot and secrets that you definitely want to uncover, but there's also a huge map for you to explore, and it's filled with dozens of non-mandatory hidden locations. Some of them are dungeons, like with NPCs, quests, and epic loot. Some of them are altars, some of them are abandoned places. It's got everything your adventuring heart might desire. There's quests to be completed by exploring the world, new quests to be gathered, loot to be found, and maybe even additional steps to be added to the game's critical path. There's also no shortage of random occurrences, and some of those are pretty badass. Exploration has come a long way since then, and although I'm not crazy about Encased, I think this is a very good example of where we're at now in the exploration department in the gaming world. And Arcanum is a bit like the forefather of many of the goody things we see in games like Encased, exploration-wise at least. And in my opinion, the locations to be discovered in Arcanum by exploring the map just smoke everything else in any other RPG. And last, but definitely not least, there's questing. While the writing in Arcanum isn't Nobel Prize winning stuff as it is in Torment, questing is simply amazing. That's right. So Moving Triangle had this to say. As one person on Reddit said, what sets Baldur's Gate 2 apart from other RPGs is the ability to do whatever, whenever, wherever. Did you want to walk around in bear form 24/7 as a druid? Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 says absolutely. Want to randomly throw a fireball in the town square to make Ball happy? Sure, but enjoy the rep laws and backlash. I think whoever said this on Reddit didn't play Arcanum. I'll say this to you, random Reddit user who probably won't ever watch this video. If that was what you liked about Baldur's Gate 2, let me tell you that you get a heck of a lot more of that freedom and even deeper consequences to its exercise in Arcanum. So basically, go check it out now if you haven't. Games like Hitman 2 give you complete freedom to navigate every chapter however you wish, but none of that amounts to anything story-wise. Games like Dragon Age allow you to steer the wheel of the story quite significantly, but your critical path and the locations you'll have to visit, while they can be visited in a different order, still remain the same. And of course, you can't kill whomever you wish whenever you wish. Arcanum is one of those very rare games that provides a near sandbox gaming experience while acknowledging many of the things you do story-wise, both good and bad. And that's just so fucking awesome. So yes, combat is bad.
Dude, it's really bad.
No, it isn't. Fine, it's really bad. And yes, there's too much of it. And yes, it can get in the way of your fun from time to time. But as a whole, gameplay in Arcanum is simply amazing. Story and lore, it is great. It's not perfect, I know. The story is a little bit rough around the edges, and there are a couple of things that are awfully plot convenient. You know, because the story needs to happen. Like this part at the very beginning of the game in which Stenner kept repeating, "Find the boy," but never actually told you his name and conveniently died before you could ask him. Because plot. or this other time in which you talk to Gudmund Orbender, a character who has crucial information for your quest, but of course the guy suffers from plot convenient madness, and he only tells you the part you need to know to complete the next part of the quest, but not enough to spare you the trip to this faraway island where you need to get the next piece of the information. Information that Gudmund could have told you, but didn't, because, again, he suffered from plot convenient madness. In spite of this, the mystery aspect of the story and the stakes associated with it are handled brilliantly, and there's always a sense of urgency and peril to everything you do. Some revelations are mind-blowing beyond anything we've seen in any of these 2000s games. I will save you the spoilers though, but the one thing that elevated Arcanum above any of its Infinity Engine isometric peers was its lore. The manual alone was a mind-blowing 189-page long book that was an absolutely amazing collection of fictitious research papers and essays that painted a rich picture of the world of Arcanum, its problems, its peoples, its recent and ancient history. It was masterfully written, and by the time I started playing the game, I was already a fan of the world. Arcanum is a world caught in a transition between medieval times and an industrial revolution. It's filled with wondrous gadgets and obscure magic. Its society is complex, and its struggles, customs, and even manners remind us of our earthen 1800s, and it's got all the Victorian and Old West vibes to go with it. And it seems to me like this is the perfect setting if you wanted to tackle themes such as the social costs of progress, social inequalities, religion, and the very meaning of life. Even if this last topic is but a footnote in Arcanum if we compare it to the treatment it got in Torment, one theme that receives a particularly good treatment is that of ingenuity. As humans, we don't ever ponder the far-reaching implications of technology beyond our natural lifespans. What I mean is that we don't ever see things this way.
Humans, when confronted with any situation, see it through the veil of their own mortality. Achieve, advance, perform. Humans are constantly driven by the shadow of their own death. This fear, unfortunately, clouds their judgment, deadens their sense of right and wrong. Humans act first, think later, and feel last of all. When Bates was given a look at our technology, he was overcome. As a human, his first thought was, what can I use this for? When it should have been, what is the cost of its use?
Technological breakthroughs always start as good-natured acts of ingenuity that tear down an obstacle.
All scientific advancement due to intelligence overcoming, compensating for limitations. Can't carry a load, so invent wheel. Can't catch food, so invent spear.
Oh, but cometh the good-intentioned invention, cometh the crooked interest that climbs through the ladder of progress only to close the manhole for others. And Arcanum, being a Troika game, has a lot to say about that. Then there's also an interesting perspective on magic as the old, hard-to-learn way of achieving things as opposed to the more democratized new ways of technology. The bottom line here is that if you pay attention to every conversation, there's a lot of food for thought here. Arcanums may not be the best story ever told, nor the best writing per se, but the fact that you are put in the driver's seat of the story itself, that you actually have the chance to steer away from its canonical path and the game's fascinating lore make up for whatever flaws it might have 1,000-fold. Companions lore-wise, they are hit and miss, and some of them have not aged too well. The good news is that you have a wide cast of characters from which to pick, and you can always choose only the good ones to come along. Virgil is your typical agreeable initial companion, much like Alistair or Caden Alenko. Also, it's no accident that he's called Virgil. Like Virgil in Dante's Divine Comedy, he will be your guide through your initial moments of the game. Like Mort in Torment, he has relevant information about the world and some leads for you to follow. There also seems to be a little something he doesn't want to tell you about himself. In every other RPG that I've played, companions tend to grow to like or dislike you depending on how much your decisions adhere or conflict with their existing beliefs and creeds. And their journeys, even those that are good like Tally's journey in the Mass Effect saga, are often stitched into the story rather than dependent on what you do. That's not the case with Virgil. This is a character that you can actually influence, someone who can actually change his vision on the world depending on how you play your cards. Check out our video on our top 10 companions to see why. I'll leave the link in the description section down below. Virgil is not the only awesome character, of course. Zana Lurin is a mysterious elven girl who seems to know more than she's letting on. And although her initial alignment is displayed as evil, throughout your journey together, it becomes clear that she's not really evil, but rather confused about what's the good guy thing to do. Not everyone's great, of course. Some characters like Sog and Chaka are nothing but filler. Garm has an extremely original story, but he lacks any significant character growth. Magnus is a dwarf who spends 90% of his time letting you know how dwarven he is. And although later on you learn there's a very interesting reason for this, he's a pain to listen to, and he feels much too on the nose, and that's just dated by current day standards. Raven is supposed to be a strong-willed elven princess. Her story is also very relevant to the plot, but her personality hardly feels like that of an elf who has been around for hundreds of years. She comes packed with a lot of noteworthy lore though. She's also a romantic interest, and although this romance is one that actually feels somewhat relevant and fulfilling compared to other romantic relationships in other games that came out around its time, it's still cringy as fuck. Companions intervene quite frequently in conversations with NPCs, and what they have to add is almost always relevant. Sometimes it's actually pretty freaking game-changing. Actually, I've even changed my mind about what I was going to do next after listening to them. One of Sanalurin's interventions in the final location of the game, and one of Virgil's comments during your confrontation with the final boss are freaking mind-blowing, so keep an eye out for those. I also love that whether or not a companion is recruitable depends on a lot more than just your alignment and level. For example, Jana Stiles is a herbologist with a technological affinity. She will offer her services as a party member only if you have a technological aptitude of at least 10, and enough intellect and knowledge to talk to her about the subject of her study. Other companions can be recruited if you did a certain something, if you have enough charisma, or if you choose the right dialogue options when talking to them. There are many games that have a better, more relatable cast of characters for you to adventure with, but many companions in Arcanum are very near the very top. Companions gameplay-wise, when it comes to combat, they are hideous. You have no control over how they level, you can't take control of them individually, and they are the dumbest motherfuckers that have ever accompanied me in any game. Well, except for maybe Elegs. Virgil helps a lot with his healing, and melee characters like Torian, Kel, and Chukka can dish out quite the punishment with the right gear. But DPS magic users are the most trigger-happy, annoying, and chaotic bunch you're ever likely to have in a party, in any game. And characters who use guns and bows like Raven use a lot more ammunition than you're likely to come by. Also, lockpicking and trap disarming for followers is inconsistent and counterintuitive. The takeaway here is that your companions are not helpful, and most of the times, they're even a drag. The fact that you can't take control of them or issue individual commands renders the whole concept of having a party almost pointless. Secondary mechanics and UX. I can see many of you pulling the plug on this one and missing out on its sensational content and story because of its hideous user experience and secondary mechanics. Take combat for example. Proper combat in an RPG involves switching characters, maybe with your F1 through F6 keys, with one of those keys used to select everyone, and once you have a character selected, use a skill by pressing the hotkey you've decided to map it to, like 1 through 9 in your keyboard, and click on the target. Instead, Arcanum uses an unnecessarily convoluted system that is not only hard to get into, but also not useful, especially when the pace of the combat will almost always drive you to cheese out every fight.
Do you like cheese?
Why, yes, I do.
Well, good then, because that's what you're going to be doing 95% of the time with the combat in Arcanum. Also, the manual, as a manual,
use my phone as a phone to actually call you.
Kinda sucks. There's no index, most screenshots are awfully small, and many explanations don't include stuff like, well, the detail that you drag spells to your hotbar with your right mouse button and not the left. This is what the manual says. These spell icons can be dragged to the hotkey bank for quick and convenient access in an emergency. Dude, every combat situation in this game is an emergency. Fuck you, Arcanum manual. As a manual. As for secondary mechanics, there's stuff you do at the vendor, like trading, inspecting, and repairing items. And because you can't switch to any party members for any reason in any situation, all these things have to be done through you. So get ready to move items from your companions to you and then back again every time you buy, sell, or repair. There's also crafting in Arcanum, and at least this doesn't completely suck. The engineering schematics are easy to learn and use. It takes some time to understand how these schematics and tech disciplines work in tandem with your tech skills, but that's part of the game's complexity, so I'll give it a pass. As for the UX, well, there's no candy coating it. It is abysmal. For starters, there is almost no pathfinding. Clicking on an area in a dungeon does not make your character simply walk there and elude the most basic obstacles. That's right, you have to click to get everywhere. You can't assign hotkeys to your skills, and combat is much too fast to simply click on a spell and then apply it on a target. As it has been said, mapping your skills to your hotbar is poorly explained in the manual and counterintuitive. Fuck you dragging with your right mouse button. And these are all, and I do mean all, the configuration options you have. Turn-based combat and real-time combat aren't consistent. For For example, there are cheese tactics that you can do in real-time combat modes that are simply impossible in turn-based combat. So yeah, it's your typical Troika game in this respect, and I hate to say it, but it's really, really bad. Sound effects and mix. This may be love speaking, but I think the sound in Arcanum is the best amongst its isometric RPG peers. There's wolves howling in forest locations, there's the rumor of people talking in crowded places, the sound of seagulls when the ocean is near when it's daytime, and frogs croaking and waves breaking against the docks at night. There's bows tensing and arrows flying, there's different sounds for different magic spells. It is pretty robust when you think of it. Now, don't get too excited, this is still an isometric RPG from the early 2000s. Yes, taverns may sound like crowded places and all, but stay more than 1 minute. And it becomes painfully obvious that sound samples aren't precisely plentiful or diverse. Also, every weapon impact sounds the same, and some combat sounds, especially melee attacks, are sameish and straight out bad at times. And there's clipping and volume issues everywhere, some of which are ear-piercing. And there's also many glitches that mute the entire sound, so yes, definitely not perfect, but still better than almost everything else that was available at the time in the isometric RPG league. Music. Whether you like the art in Arcanum or not, there's one thing you have to give it credit for. It's 1000% consistent throughout the game, and it absolutely nails the Victorian meets Old West meets medieval fantasy vibe they were going for. This is also true of the music, of course. Unfortunately, some dungeons are much too long, and the score tends to get a little bit repetitive halfway through every dungeon crawl. I still love all the tracks, and for me, this 100% works as background work music. Voice acting.
Hello again, traveler. Yes, I knew you'd return to me, and it seems that you still walk the shore. This gladdens me. It means that you've chosen the right path, traveler. At least, right in the way that you see things.
If you would. I know I've already asked much of you, but an old man needs to put his mind at ease.
No one knows. Since his death, he has appeared above Pelosian's pool every night at midnight. He floats there for an hour and then fades away. No one has ever been able to coax him to speak. You must find a way to bring his voice forth.
I think they absolutely nailed every important voice. Some dialogue lines are a little bit on the nose, and therefore the voice acting comes off as on the nose too. It's a 20-year-old game after all, but the delivery per se is fantastic. Like Torment, Arcanum's lore is pretty unique. Actually, more so than Torment if you ask me. It must have not been easy to make all these voices sound appropriately Victorian or dwarf who lives inside a mountain-ish. Unfortunately, not all of it is voiced, but the voice acting is so good, I wish it had been entirely voiced. But I think there's enough of it to give it a score, and it's going to be a good one. Graphics. Again, the art in Arcanum is consistent from head to toe and from shoulder to shoulder. Arcanum's concept is a complex blend of medieval, Old West, and Victorian style aesthetics, and I think this is fascinating. Locations are a bit of a mixed bag though. Most locations are filled with detail and paint a rich and diverse landscape. Cities, for example, do feel adequately Victorian, and they also feel alive and busy, but many of them look a bit the same. Get a little distracted and you'll be forgetting whether you're in Caledon or Tarant. Aside from standout landmarks like the City Hall in Caledon or Bates House in Tarant, there's just like 2 or 3 different building models that are repeated throughout most cities and towns. While cities and towns in Baldur's Gate 2 each feel like a product of their time and history, human cities in Arcanum feel as though they were made by the same architect during the same period of time. But then there's also the elven city of Kantara, which is absolutely fantastic, although it seems as though it was also built by the same architect who made the dark elf city of Seng Ang. But surprisingly enough, it's the clothes and the gear that steal the show here. While every armor, sword, and staff looks exactly the same in almost all these Infinity Engine-based RPGs from the 2000s, gear in Arcanum looks colorful, varied, and some pieces even look super cool on your characters. It's not all sunshine and bunnies though. The enemies could have used a lot more work. Like, a lot. Compared to the bad guys in the Icewind Dale series and Baldur's Gate 2, they look like garbage. And although most aspects of the user experience in Arcanum are terrible, the user interface is one of the best I've seen in any of these Infinity Engine-based isometric RPGs from the 2000s. I've made no secret that I love the user interface in Icewind Dale too. Well, I think Arcanum is even more awesome. As a package, I'd say graphics are pretty darn solid. Performance and stability. It's not great. It's not even good. It's glitchy, it's buggy, it crashed 4 times, and there are many parts in which there are significant FPS drops. There's also a pretty good chance of your save files becoming corrupted in locations like Vendigroth or the Bagalian Deeps, so save often and make sure you don't override your previous save files. It's still not as bad as Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines was when it first came out, or Temple of Elemental Evil, but that isn't really saying much. I usually don't recommend mods, but if you're going to give this one a shot, I'd say you get that high-res mod and play it windowed. Other considerations and final thoughts. So there's this song about some guy who wants to hold a girl's hand. And then there is this song that tells the story of someone who turned every traumatic experience he had in life into bricks with which he built a wall to isolate himself from the world around him, but was eventually forced to tear it down by the voices in his head. I think you can guess which of these songs targets the broader audience and which one is meant to appeal to a very specific niche. Arcanum is like the second song. It's definitely not for everyone. Its theme is not your typical medieval fantasy, post-apocalyptic, or space sci-fi deal. Its combat is very clunky and very difficult to get into. Its secondary mechanics are dated as fuck, and it has some serious performance issues. But no other game that I know of puts you in the driver's seat of the story like Arcanum does. Its character creation and leveling system constitutes a deep bag of tools that lets you navigate the story however you wish, to the point of altering the very critical path of the game. It's a game filled with fascinating characters, settings, and an interesting story. It's an old world that's worth living in for quite a few hours of your gaming time. And as risky as it might be to recommend Arcanum, I still think there's a good chance it will end up pressing all your right keys at just the right time. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, thank you for watching all the way up until now. If you like what you're seeing in this channel, please consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell to avoid the usual YouTube shenanigans. Share the video, but most importantly, never stop gaming. Don't let gaming get in the way of your hopes and dreams. Bye everyone.